All right, let's dive into one of the big ones, Milan Kundera's masterpiece, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. This isn't just a novel. It's a deep dive into love, politics, and some really heavy philosophy, all unfolding during one of the most intense moments in modern history. So the book kicks off with this huge, kind of mind-bending question. Think about it. What if your life only happens once? Like, really only once, with no second chances, no do-overs? Does that make everything you do feel light, almost meaningless, or does it make every single choice unbearably heavy with significance? This one idea is the engine that drives the entire story. It's what every single character is wrestling with.
And the setting for all this? Prague, 1968. I mean, what a time to be alive. You've got the Prague Spring, this incredible brief moment where it felt like anything was possible. Art, freedom, real political change. But then, bam, the dream gets shattered by a Soviet invasion. And this isn't just some historical wallpaper. This event, this collision of hope and absolute oppression, is going to crash right into our characters' lives and change everything.
Okay, so let's get into it. We're going to start with the guy right in the middle of this philosophical hurricane, a man who's built his entire life around avoiding any kind of weight.
So meet Tomas. He's this brilliant surgeon, super charismatic, an intellectual, and yeah, a total womanizer. But he has this really strict rule he lives by. Love and sex, two totally separate things. And for him, this isn't about being cruel or cold. No, it's his whole philosophy. He calls it lightness, and it's his ticket to a life without the heavy baggage of commitment or emotional drama.
And right there, with Tomas's philosophy, you have the central conflict of the entire novel. It's this epic battle between two totally opposite ways of living, lightness versus weight.
So what exactly is lightness? Well, it's this idea that, hey, since we only get one shot at life, none of our actions really have this huge, ultimate cosmic meaning. There are no dress rehearsals, right? For Tomas, this is just freeing. It means freedom from having to make promises, freedom from jealousy, freedom from all the heavy stuff that seems to bog everyone else down.
And on the flip side, you've got weight. And weight is, well, it's everything lightness isn't. It's that powerful pull of love, the gravity of making a real commitment. It's feeling responsible for other people. And it's also the fact that you just can't escape history. It's that nagging feeling that our choices do matter. Maybe they matter more than anything because they only happen one time.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the two main characters are basically walking, talking versions of this very conflict. You've got Thomas, our champion of lightness, with all his affairs and his obsession with being independent. But then Teresa crashes into his life, and she's like an anchor. She is all weight, she's looking for stability, she's vulnerable, she's completely in love, and she represents this kind of emotional depth that absolutely terrifies him, but also kind of fascinates him. Their whole relationship is just this massive tug-of-war between these two ideas.
So just when you think this is all a personal philosophical drama, everything gets violently interrupted. Because here's the thing about this book. No one, and I mean no one, gets to just live outside of history.
So our characters are right in the middle of this amazing, hopeful time, the Prague Spring. Art is exploding, political freedom feels real, but then August 1968 happens. Soviet tanks literally roll into the streets. And just like that, the hope is gone, crushed. The regime that takes over is all about repression, a place where just thinking for yourself becomes the most dangerous thing you can possibly do.
And Kundera makes such a powerful point here. When you're living under a system that demands total loyalty, there's no such thing as a private life. It just doesn't exist. Thomas, the guy who tried his whole life to stay out of politics, suddenly realizes there's no way to be neutral. Your job, who you love, even when you stay silent, the state sees everything, and it's either obedience or it's dissent. There's no in between.
And just look at what happens. This shows you the absolutely devastating cost of one single intellectual act. Tomas writes this really smart allegorical article. He compares the regime's lies to the story of Oedipus. The state, of course, demands he take it back. He says no. And for that one moment of integrity, his life is just systematically taken apart. He goes from being one of the top surgeons in the country to a window washer. It's a total public humiliation, and it's all designed to just crush him. Now, while all this is happening to Thomas and Teresa back in Prague, we've got two other really important characters, Sabina the artist and Franz the professor. And they're out in the West trying to figure out what it even means to be free when you're in exile.
Sabina and Franz are like two sides of the same coin when it comes to dealing with ideology.
You've got Sabina, who was Tomas's lover for a long time, and her whole thing is betrayal. She's constantly running away from any system, any group, any label that tries to define her. Then there's Franz, her lover in the West, and he does the complete opposite. He dives headfirst into protests, marches, and big causes, trying to find meaning by being part of something bigger. What's so brilliant is that Kundera is pretty critical of both of them. He suggests Sabina's total freedom just leads to a kind of emptiness, and Franz's activism, he calls it kitsch, basically a kind of performative, feel-good morality that doesn't really question anything.
Okay, so this brings us to the real turning point of the story. How does Thomas, the guy who spent his entire life running away from emotional weight, end up making a choice that changes, well, everything?
So, they manage to escape to Switzerland, but Teresa just feels lost there. She's isolated, and she decides she has to go back to Prague, back to the occupation. And this is the moment. Thomas chooses to follow her. Just think about that. He gives up his career, his freedom, his entire philosophy of lightness. He throws it all away for her. That burden he ran from his whole life, the weight of his love for Teresa, it actually becomes the one thing that finally gives his life purpose.
So back in Czechoslovakia, they're pushed out of the city. They end up in the countryside, and their life becomes, well, incredibly simple. He drives a truck, she works on a farm. And it's here, with all their ambition and status stripped away, that they actually find a kind of quiet happiness. They finally figure out how to escape history, not by fighting it head-on, but by making their lives so small, so private, that the state basically can't even see them anymore.
Now, the book ends with them dying together in a car accident. And that sounds tragic, I know, but Kundera doesn't frame it that way at all. It's presented more like a peaceful resolution. They found their meaning, not in some abstract freedom from commitment, but in the real, shared weight of the life they built together. Their story, in its own way, is finally complete.
And that leaves us with a pretty heavy question, one that feels maybe even more urgent today than when the book was written. You know, this whole story is a huge warning about how easily big political forces can just erase our private lives. It really makes you wonder, right? In a world that feels increasingly loud, with surveillance, nationalism, and ideology seemingly everywhere, how do we protect our right to just have a private life? How do we carve out those small, quiet, human spaces where we can just live and love, away from all the noise?